Aloha, everybody. This is Cathy Bilsky, the Quantum Leap Let Light Unite show on UPRN Radio. And this is October 5th, 2018. Tonight, and I want to apologize for last week. I had absolutely no control over it. And my producer also said all that
Yes,
talking.
I apologize.
There we go. We got the apology. It's live radio. It happens. And I will promise to do the soul retrieval again and without the extra in the background. Tonight, I've got a really special guest coming on the show, and that is MIguel Dean. And he wrote this really great book called Stepping Stones in the Mist. And, I brought him on because he works with kids. And that, especially with what all the kids are going through. And I thought maybe he could talk a little bit on his perspective and what, how he works with them and what really shifts them and what touches their heart. Now, okay. Now, MIguel, from a challenging start to life, MIguel spiraled down into a life of violence, addiction, and homelessness. But the love of his newborn son inspired him to take responsibility and make changes. And for the last 20 years, he has been immersed in the twin paths of healing and transformation, which can be summarized as an inner journey to heal his own wounds, facilitated and complemented by his contribution to service to others and spirituality-rooted social change. Now, initially working with disadvantaged young people for many years, MIguel has now evolved into a profoundly effective catalyst for change and the return of the divine masculine and feminine to the world, which is so important. The Shakti energy moving through him enables him to be and hold a safe place for women so that she can release and open and heal, leading to her blossoming and flowering. For many, inspires them to feel what they need to feel and return to the realm of the heart for their own and the collective's healing. His intuitive, sensitive nature and honest, authentic, and open-heartedness are amongst the gifts he has to share in his passion to serve and ease the transition from what no longer serves humanity and the planet into what is increasingly being known as a more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. Well, welcome, MIguel.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Cathy. It's lovely to be here.
How did you actually get started working with the disadvantaged children?
Yeah, like a lot of things in my life, it was it just sort of happened. I kind of fell into it, which sounds like it just happened randomly, but it was obviously meant to be. It actually the sort of the point where I started working with them was where I'd finished the counselling qualification, and the work that I was doing was with adults with learning difficulties at the time. And excuse me. So I couldn't carry on practicing my counselling skills with that sort of client group. So my tutor said, well, why don't you do some voluntary work? So I thought, yeah, that'd be a good idea. So I just, I kind of opened the phone book. We had phone books in those days, and just ran my finger down and just with my eyes closed and just stopped at a youth organisation. And I just thought, right, well, I'll ring them up and just see what's happening, see if I can volunteer with them. Come on, come on down and let's have a conversation. So that's what I did. And yeah, one thing led to another. So 22 years later, I've been through quite a few different variations of working with young people. But I mean, as the text said that you just read out, the real starting point, I guess, was when I just began my awakening, if you like, and yeah, things were really bad and really rock bottom. And I'd hoped that the birth of my son was going to miraculously make everything better, and all of a sudden I'd feel happy and I'd know what it was to be a man and all that sort of stuff. But it didn't. So I was faced with this dilemma of, okay, do I just walk away and spiral down into a further deeper black hole than I was already in, or do I begin to face my fears and do something differently? And you know, I'm very pleased to say that I feel that I made the right decision in that case, and began facing my fears. So the youth work began with my little 2-year-old youth. So that's kind of how it all began, really, Cathy.
Well, how did you get to writing your book?
The book again, yeah, this might be a recurring theme, but I was sat in a session with my sort of friend slash coach, and he said to me, "What's the next thing that you need to do in order to, move forward?" And I just heard this voice, kind of like, it was one of those times where I didn't really feel like it was me saying it. I didn't think about it. It just came out. I need to write my book. And then it was like, oh shit, who said that? I don't know how to write a book. How's that going to work? But I didn't have a lot of work on at the time. I was working for myself. It was the early days, that early stage of self-employment, where it's good. It's easy having all the stuff, all the paperwork and everything laid down, but actually getting the clients and doing the marketing and sales part of it was proving a little challenging. I thought, right, well, I might as well use my time wisely. And I just sat down at the computer the next morning and said, okay, let's see what comes out. And I couldn't stop, really. It just kept coming out. I wrote that first book in about 8 weeks. It was really, it was bursting to come out.
I understand. I wrote 2 books myself, and then when it's time to write, it flows, and but your book has a lot of life lessons in it. And what I liked is after every chapter, you've got these little lessons for life. And I thought maybe it would be really great just kind of touch base on some of those, because I think everybody's going through them. So, you're talking about unconscious rebellion. And so we're just going to, if you don't mind, read some of your lessons for life. Life is full of lessons when we open our eyes and ears and are receptive. Often the lessons are highlighted through synchronicity of meaningful chance encounters. There are many good people in the world, and regardless of past experience, one should be open to this truth. Human beings have a fundamental need to belong, and every decision or action I make today will impact on all of my tomorrows. These are really wise words.
Thank you. Yeah, it just seemed that, when I looked back over my journey, it was kind of like, well, how did I get where I was, to where I am now, as in when I was writing the book? And yeah, it became very clear that, well, I am an experiential learner. I'm not very good at, people saying, well, this is how it is, and me going, oh yeah, okay. I'm like, okay, well, I need to check that out. I need to see if that's true in my own experience. And it felt like it would be, valuable. It would give another layer to the book, if you like, if I sort of really sort of drew those lessons out a little bit, things that had helped me on my journey. Because I see increasingly that we're all living what I call different versions of the same story. So all the life lessons apply, really. We tend to think, oh, it's just personal to us and it's just the challenges that we have to go through. But although the stimulus and stuff and the challenges are slightly different, they're all, the intention of the universe seems to be evoked to evoke the same results,
Well, but a lot of, like what you're putting, we're all going through it. I think when you go through the hard times and you go through the drugs and the violence and the homelessness, it is hard to trust. Mm-hmm. And you've got to start off at A again. So do you actually, have a group that comes together to actually, like a support group?
A support group for myself?
Well, for people like for the kids, or do you have men come in that have had, that are starting over, that need that reinforcement?
Yeah, there's nothing sort of terribly structured, but as a result of, I guess, largely through my Facebook, and which in turn sort of determines a steady trickle of the books going out there. That people do get in touch, and I do get lots of questions, and often people that are in similar situations to where I was, do get in touch with me. There's no organized system to it, but I work one-to-one. I call them healing conversations with people that are wanting to step more fully into their own power, largely so that they can contribute more to the collective, because I feel that that's really what the time is about. And I guess, my I do a bit of a Gandhi thing, really, that where, my life is my message, and the way that I live my life, and so that when I'm with the young people, or I'm with adult clients, or whoever I'm with, my intention is always, just to live and breathe it. It's the energy that I am. It's what I emanate.
Well, again, we're going to go back to your book and Lessons for Life, and there, there, some of it is what we've said, or I've said many times to people too. Sometimes things have to get worse before they get better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I often say sometimes it's got to get so dark until people make a shift. It's like they really got to hit that bottom, and then it's like the light goes off, like I don't want to be there anymore. And the more you give, the more you receive. That's such a simple concept, but not a lot of people get it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the darkness one, it does seem to be that pain seems to be very much a wake-up call. It's like life keeps turning up the pain in an attempt to say, look, you're not doing the right thing, you're not honoring yourself, you're not, but this isn't helpful for you. So it's almost like the pain is needed to steer us away, from the track that we're on at the time, to try something different. But I do really want to say there that, because I got into a belief for quite a while that pain was the only way, that we could learn. And I'm at the end of the book, of the first edition of the book, I wrote, I look forward to the challenges to come, and and the learning that will ensue from that. And then a few years later, I read that page, and I was like, whoa, hold on, what am I invoking there? So I just added a little couple of sentences at the end that said, well, but maybe now's the time to learn from love and joy, and and peace and happiness. That we can learn from that as long as we're aware and listening. Then we don't need life to give us a kick up the backside and to turn the pain up if we are awake and aware. Yeah.
Don't you think now you're getting more into the nurturing feminine side? Now, when I give free mini massages to people, I literally tell them, I don't have to hurt you to make you feel good. So, we don't believe, I have to give you pain for gain. That's the man side. The nurturing side is, I'll do what I have to make you feel good, but I don't have to hurt you.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe that's slightly just the distorted masculine to some extent, but it's really interesting. Yeah, I'd not thought of it like that, Cathy. But I suppose when I did realize that, and did that second edition of the book, it was probably about the time when the feminine energy was really starting to move through me. And I really like that. Thank you for pointing that out.
My pleasure. So, you've got 3 layers of the book. What are they?
Okay, so the first layer is essentially the story. Let me have a sip of this. Yeah, so it's just the story of what happened, really. The book, the introduction sort of very briefly tells about my first 18 years when things were challenging as a child and so on, and losing my mom. But I didn't want to dwell on that. I didn't want to dwell on the bit that was, if you like, where I was in the where I was in the passenger seat of the car. I wanted the book to be about when I was in the driver's seat, when I'd become an adult, and I was making the decisions. So the book begins really, when I left home, and charts my story up to what was about, I think it's about 8 years ago that the book was published. So it's, just what happened really. The second level really is about the life lessons and sharing the wisdom and the insights, that arose, which, it feels like that's what life's about, isn't it? We're sort of here in this earth school to learn lessons for the, however you want to put it, the evolution of our soul, or to wake up, the evolution of consciousness. So that's what the second layer is about. And the third layer kind of came by accident, really. I sort of saw it later, and that was all about vulnerability, because I kept getting feedback from people saying how, just about everybody that read it said I could so relate to this book, and that really surprised me to begin with, because I thought my story was sort of quite unique, and in a way it is unique, but it's that thing of the emotions and the understandings and the learnings that come from these different challenges that we have are all fundamentally the same.
And when you say challenges, you're talking about your life of violence, addiction, and homelessness. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So when I left home, my self-esteem was really low. I didn't feel I was worthy of love. I thought I was a waste of space, that I would never amount to anything. So of course, unconsciously we choose outwardly the situations that will reflect how we feel inside. And I didn't really waste too much time in that. And again, just totally unconsciously, it just felt like I fell into it. But I fell into this quite shadowy world of drugs and crime and violence that ended up on the road. I kind of did the new age traveler thing for about 7 years, but fell into the new age traveler scene. There was quite a sort of, like any society, there was two ends of the spectrum, and there was on one end there was kind of the peace loving, nature loving, barefoot sort of hippie sort of people. Low impact on the environment and so on. And on the other end of the spectrum, there was a kind of pretty chaotic, messed up sort of hard drugs and just chaos. And I ended up living with those people. And you just kind of had to be totally out of your face to be able to cope with the chaos and the violence. Every night somebody's windows would get put through on their vehicle, or the police would come round and there'd be violence there. And it was just, or local vigilantes would drive by and throw, there was just always some chaos going on. And
can I ask you, was it satanic at all?
Say that again, Cathy.
Was it satanic at all? Did you go that deep? To go into the world of black magic?
No, it didn't really go. I wouldn't really say that it went into that world. It just went into a real world of severe self-abuse and self-neglect, really. That was where it went. And to the point that I wasn't together enough to have a vehicle or anything. And I ended up just begging on the streets for enough money to get high enough so that I could sleep, on the cold caravan floor. It was just, I was sleeping in a while, it had no windows or furniture or anything. It was just where I went at the end of the day. It was just total anesthetization. You can feel, go for it.
All right. Now, I would consider you a master teacher for what you've done, what you've experienced. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And, even to the point of being shamanistic. Okay.
Okay.
If I'm wrong, just let me know. But part of the initiation of a shaman is that you have to experience what it is like to be homeless and put yourself out on the street. Now, I did it by choice, but you still ended up in that realm. And when you do, I mean, for me, when you go down into that depth, you experience it like no one else can. I mean, when I put myself on the street, I could see how people could lose it in 24 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't take long to really go down and really hit rock bottom. And then, what it takes to pull yourself back up. And it actually, to me, you have some kind of spiritual awakening. Now, you had it when your son was born, but it gave you enough of a light to go, I can't do this anymore. And, and for me, I look at it, a person's become an awakened spiritual being again when they start looking for ways on how they can improve their lives and move forward. And I just look at everything you've gone through, and, no matter how tough it was, you had to go through that so you could teach what you're teaching now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
done.
Thanks, Cathy. Yeah. I can feel this kind of emotion in me rising while you're saying that. So it's kind of, I appreciate you acknowledging that. Sometimes it's so easy for ourselves, isn't it, to kind of have this, the mind always wants to go to, yeah, well, what next, and what aren't you good at, and what do you need to, improve on, and yeah, it's good to remember where I came from, and I do totally see it as, I call it the gifts in adversity. I wouldn't want to go through any of it again, but I know so clearly I can see the stepping stones in the mist that all led me to where I am now, and with the power, with the love, with the with the privileged position that I am in today, to know myself and be able to contribute and share love with so many people. It's a real blessing.
If you didn't go through all that, you wouldn't be able to relate to the kids that you work with at all.
No.
It's like an alcoholic, and can relate to an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't BS them at all.
Yeah.
So you got to sometimes go through the experience to really get it ingrained so you can teach it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I don't believe that we can teach anything that we don't know in our own experience, and I would like to just totally concur with what you were saying. The awakening process, it seems to be like there's kind of like layers and levels. There are ongoing profound experiences that happen that just kind of awaken a little bit more. It's an ongoing process. I don't believe in this, like I just woke up this day and now I'm awake. It's like, no, we're always awakening from my perspective.
We are, but then again, when you've been on the street, you can still get battered down very quickly. It depends, it's like you're coming out of a cocoon, you're in this very delicate stage of your life. And, and I think that's why when you go through the AAA program, that they're reinforcing. And I forgot what I was going to go with that. Oh my God. I'm having a brain bubble.
They're great, those moments. That's great. You've given me permission to be able to do that now as well. So thanks for that, Cathy.
You're welcome. All right. So what about the Children's Fire? Talk about that.
The Children's Fire. Yeah, that was a story that I heard a few years ago, and it just really touched me. And I realize now it really touched me because it was leading to, I wasn't doing that work then. Okay, so where do I start? So the Children's Fire essentially is a Native American tradition that arose when lots of the tribes and the elders first came together and said, you know, how do we govern our people? How do we work together? And how do we, you know, how do we create a beautiful society and a beautiful way of living? And so, as always, the Native Americans looked out into creation and said, well, let's look at and see what Mother Earth is doing, because she's our teacher. You know, what are the key things that we can pull from that? And the first thing that they saw when they looked out was that how whenever the balance of the masculine and feminine went out of kilter, that there would be suffering. And so they looked at, you know, the masculine and feminine principles of nature and the way that the animals, you know, the mother and the father of the young and so on, how they were. And so they saw that the masculine and feminine balance is key to, you know, any healthy society or any healthy environment. And so they made sure that there would always be women present in the council, as well as the chiefs, the male elders. And if I'm right in thinking, there was a kind of, the female elders would sort of sit above. It's not like a hierarchical thing, but the men would sit in circle, but there would always, the women would always be some wise women that would have the last say and that would give guidance as well. And the second principle that they saw when they looked out into nature was how that when the most important thing that all the animals or all the creatures put as their precedence was the care of the young, and that, you know, that they would fight to provide for the young, that they would hunt, that they would, you know, it was just all the energy went into making sure that the young were well taken care of, because they were the future of the species, they were the future generations. And so the chiefs decided that they would light what they call the children's fire. It would be a small fire that would sit beside the main fire in the council meetings, and it would always remind them that any decision that they made, any law that they changed, anything at all, they would always look, how will that affect the 7 generations to come of our children? And, you know, I really love that story, because it, you know, it's just so much about seeing the bigger picture instead of these 5 years of government that we've got. And because of the work that I do, you know, I just see that the way that we are living is causing so much pain and suffering to our young people. And then the masculine and feminine bit, I wasn't really living that at the moment. That hadn't awoken in me really at the moment, and my that calling hadn't been revealed yet. But now I see that my work with the divine feminine and energy that moves through me, and that I'm in service to, those two strands just weave together, and you can't separate them, can you? How can you separate the care of the young with the balance of the masculine and feminine? It's both the same thing really, and it's become what my life is all about. That's who I am, and that's what I live and breathe.
Let's talk about trauma release and awakening journey. Is there like a meditation you would recommend for people that need to release trauma?
I guess if we use the term meditation loosely, because I guess the reason, what comes to mind with that is I had a real sort of severe trauma release experiences just a couple of years ago. And actually, when I look back and see what facilitated that, it was actually an intention. It was a deep intention that I set myself. And then once I'd set that intention, life just orchestrated the right conditions for it to be, you know, for the trauma release to happen. And for me, that was all about, because my mother died when I was 7 months old. And then I kind of like lost 2 other mothers, if you like, in the next 5 years. So by the time I was 5, I'd lost the divine feminine, the love in my life, you know, 3 times. And so that left a really deep impact, you know, on me. And physiologically, I had no, you know, I had no memory of it, but that had plagued and been a bit of a curse really for all of my relationships with women in my adulthood, because there was always this other story playing out of fear of abandonment and neediness, and the little boy it was so much a little boy relating to a woman rather than a man relating to a woman. I just reached this point where I'd been through a few relationships, and got divorced from the mother of my children, and I just kind of put my sword in the ground and said, no more. I am not running from this. I know what is going on here, and I know I can see how I've avoided it, and I can see how I've got stoned or whatever to numb and not feel it fully. But I met this amazing woman who maybe some would call a twin flame, and it was like, I will give everything to be with this woman. I am not. This wound will be healed now once and for all. I'm not having this. I'm not having this shit anymore. And so yeah, life said, okay, great, you're ready. Let's bring it on. So this beautiful woman was an expert at leaving me. She was really good at leaving me. So she just triggered perfectly, exactly the right conditions that were needed, because the wound, the trauma was near the surface enough through my intention. And one day we had an argument, and she said, I need some space. And I said, well, what, you need a couple of hours or something? She said, no, I need a couple of weeks. And I said, well, and then what happens? And she said, I don't know. She said, I don't know if I can carry on doing this. And she drove away, and there was no conscious thought. I just dropped into this severe grief and pain, and was just a mess. And a friend called me up shortly afterwards, and I just heard this voice screaming through me going, I want my mummy. And I couldn't eat solid food. I couldn't sleep. I was just eating squidgy sort of baby food. I couldn't digest food. It lasted for 8 days. And I just sat with that pain, essentially. I just sat with it, and I stayed with it, and I kept repeating Rumi's mantra, the wound is the place where the light gets in. The wound is the place where the light gets in. It's okay, it's okay. And I just stayed with it. And it just felt like an emptying out, an emptying out. And by the end of 8 days, after 8 days, she came back in a very miraculous, strange kind of like way, but that's another story. And yeah, it just, the massive piece of that work was finally done, and I know that it's finally done, because every time there was any other little breakups or letting goes, I wouldn't feel it in my body. I wouldn't feel the trauma. Every end of a relationship had always brought up so much kind of physical trauma, and I was always like, does everybody feel this bad when their girlfriend leaves them, or when they have an argument? And now it's a completely different situation. There's a grief or there's a sadness, but there's no going into all the physical, I can't eat anymore, and so there was a massive healing around it, and the healing is ongoing. It's not like 8 days and it's like job done, but it's so more manageable now. And the little boy, what I really saw happen through those 8 days was, to begin with, it was the little boy that was so wounded and so in fear. But gradually the man began to show up more and more, and just placate the little boy and go and say, hey, look, your girlfriend just wants a bit of space. That's all it is. From the man could see that, but the little boy was terrified. And I went on a pilgrimage. I went to my mother's grave, and I spoke to my other mothers that I'd had, and I just did a lot of work, built an altar, and just sat in the fire, I guess. Sometimes you just got to sit in the fire and just allow whatever needs to come out. And yeah, that's what I did, Cathy. Yeah, that was my big trauma release gift, shall we say, which I'd rather not go through again. And I don't need to go through it again, because I've done it. I've been there. I've been through that fire. Yeah.
So you got here working with teenagers and rites of passage. What does that mean?
So I work with young people that are usually young men, usually young men that are between 15 years old and maybe 25 years old, that sort of age bracket. And I was asked to do a talk at the Goddess conference in Glastonbury about rites of passage. And to begin with, I was kind of like, well, do I do that? Because I don't sort of, it's not like I practice ceremony with these young people that I work with in any way, but it's who I am again. And they kind of like get bathed in that energy and the sort of rites of passage elements of, that you just talked about, that when we go through hardship, there is a gift in it, that all rites of passage, there was always a challenge. There was always you had to go out and catch an animal, or you had to fast for so many days on your own, or you had to, so it's like, it's just constantly reinforcing to the young people that I work with, because they're all going through challenges. Some of them are in care, they're fostered, they don't live with their parents. A lot of them have got drug issues, nearly all from broken homes, to some degree, dysfunctional families. Show me a not dysfunctional family these days. So it's really kind of like, just bringing those key principles of what it is to be a man, rather than, what it is to be a boy, and just living those and just sharing those with them, about taking responsibility, not blaming others, about, again, as we touched on, the more that we give, the more that we receive. When you're a man, you start thinking about, how can I serve? How can I help others, rather than just get my own needs met? And I just, because that's who I am and that's who I believe, that just kind of rubs off on them. I don't believe in, sitting down and we're doing a lesson on rites of passage or whatever. It's just that kids seem to learn so well through absorption, and they learn from what you do, not what you say. So, I spend a lot of time, we just hang out really, most of the time when I'm working with these young people. Sometimes, it's through a Skype medium, video call, sometimes it's face to face. If it's face to face, we'll go and have something to eat. And maybe we'll drive around in the car and I'll give them my iPhone and say, right, put some tunes on. There's a lot of just accepting them where they are, because there's so much work with young people that's trying to fix them and mend them and force them into something and change them into something before they're ready. They need to go through their homelessness metaphorical stage, their dark stage, and they need to be allowed to be there in order to reach the point where they're ready to change. And there's so much stuff that we do in society that actually slows that process down. I call it the mattress syndrome, where we throw mattresses in front of young people. They're about to fall and hit the floor. And instead of allowing them to hit the floor and the pain waking them up and making them decide, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore, we rescue them and we throw mattresses under to cushion the fall. And so they never, we just slow down the point where they're going to realize, shit, I need to do something different here. And we disempower them because somebody else is always fixing them and saving them,
I understand. But as I listen to you talk, I just, sorry, do you realize how shamanistic your work is? And you pull much from, the Native Americans, shamanistic. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So,
go on.
You've got a few books that are going to come out.
Yes.
A children's book and a twin flame healing and intimate relationship book.
Yes, yeah. My children's book, Little Mouse and the Apples, is it's being published at the moment. The artwork's being done, and the publishers assure me that it's going to be out by the end of November. So I'm really excited about that, because that was just it's for 3 to 7 year olds. When I write, it tends to happen that I just have a heading or a little idea, and then I just sit and I just see what comes out. And one morning I juice. So I have a bucket of apples outside my back door for my juicer, and there were just 3 left. And one morning I just went to get my apples, and a little mouse had fallen in the bucket. He was sat there with the 3 apples. So that was how that story came, and it's very much about a mouse, I guess, to some degree, a bit of a MIguel shaman mouse kind of thing. That he's very much about curiosity and finding out things for himself. It's very much about courage. There's a bit of meditation in there. There's a bit of the cosmic nature of life. So it's I'm excited about that. It's a little seed, to plant into little children, and I just love the idea of them being read their bedtime story and then falling asleep with these ideas and principles and beliefs, that are infused into the little mouse story. So, you've got to start young. They say it's easier to raise healthy children than it is to fix broken men. So that's my little contribution to, to working with the real little babes.
What about the Twin Flame book?
Wow, yeah, that's been such a labor of love. It's it's getting there, and it's based on the true story, that happened with me and this amazing, beautiful angel that came into my life and crucified me, just totally blessed me with so much pain that needed to leave, that was still inside me, and how the nature of conscious relationships, really, that through relationship we have the potential, it's a path to awakening, and it's a path to healing if we choose to live from that way. And it's not all supposed to be nice and fluffy all the time. It's not for the faint-hearted, to go into the depths of relationship and what that brings up and what that mirrors and what that shows us. So it's it is about a year. It's about a year of my life, and it's infused with all the magic. There was an awful lot of magic that happened. This woman was very sort of clairvoyant, and I don't even know the words, but all sorts of, I call magic stuff that I can't really get my head around, stuff that our rational mind doesn't really compute. And I don't need to work it out. I just love that magic seems to be increasingly a part of my life. And she brought so much magic and so much healing, and I just felt that it needed to be out there, because there's a war going on so much of the time, between the masculine and feminine still, an inner war with our own inner masculine and feminine. And of course, then that's mirrored out into relationships and then what's happening on the planet. And there's a big scary bit of, it was a scary book for me to write. It's the first scary book that I've written, because I wanted to go into a lot of detail. There's a lot of bedroom scenes, shall we say. I wanted to really go into the sort of erotic and the sort of tantric elements of making love and so on. In a way, it was a bit of a 2 fingers up at 50 Shades of Grey, and that it can be
so everybody's ears are going, oh.
Yeah. Well, one of the scary bits was kind of like, well, who are you to be writing about this, MIguel? Who do you think you are, Don Juan or something, like, but it was like, fuck it, I want to, how many men write love stories and really go into this stuff? And I'm like, if not me, who? It's just from my perspective. I'm not saying it's the truth or anything, but my thing about vulnerability, when I'm vulnerable and I share, I don't believe there should be any taboos, Cathy. Why do we not talk about sex? Why do we not talk about making love? Why do we not talk about death? Why do we not talk about all these, aspects of shame and guilt that we've been taught to hide away? And I believe that the body is sacred, and that we spend too much time in our heads. And a lot of my path for awakening has been making that journey back into my heart, back into my body, and honoring the magic, the mystery, the miracle of being in these human bodies. So that the book's very much about that as well. Yeah. So yeah, that I don't know when that one's going to be ready, but it's almost written. It's almost written, and then I've got to go through the whole, do the publishing thing and stuff. And I want to do this one properly, get it published. The first one, my Stepping Stones, was self-published. I want this one to be, to get a publishing deal, and so that it's marketed properly and so on, so that it really gets out there and reaches more people, because I think there must be so many relationships, so many men, women that are, that could just do with a little bit of a guidance or inspiration or ideas, about how it could be different.
Have you noticed, though, how there's becoming a role reversal between men and women? That I found that more men are becoming drama queens, and literally becoming drama queens, and the women are just solid. And I will give the example of just happened recently with the Brett Kavanaugh thing in our country. And you've heard of that. I'm sure everybody heard. It's very shameful. But you see Kavanaugh, the man, and he is going off and just, I'm thinking, my God, I used to have, tantrums like that when I was younger. I've grown past that. And the woman, very calm, very in body, and you see the reversal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there is an element of that, isn't there? That and neither one is particularly healthy. Well, it's to get it right. It's always a fine line, isn't it? Because sometimes the strong can be a shutting down, and it can be a too strong. And women, there seems to be happening massively that women have had to be, is it emasculated? They've had to become the strong, hard one, and women seem to often find that they've forgotten how to be the softness and so on, because ideally man should hold space for woman. I wrote a piece that I called "I Am a Fence." The masculine energy is a protective energy that holds space for woman, so that she can be soft and she can be creative and she can dance and be that creative life force. But she needs that masculine energy, and then that's not been there, so she's had to do both of it. And then the man, it's perhaps to some degree, is kind of like going, well, my woman's so hard and so sort of male, what's left for me in the picture, perhaps. So they perhaps become a bit, over dramatic and too emotional. But it's like you say, there's a difference between a man feeling his emotions and a little boy having a tantrum. They're two very different things, aren't they?
So how do we tell the difference?
Well, I think for the first thing that comes to mind is that we take responsibility. When my little boy's having a tantrum, it's usually pointing the finger out there and going, "Oh, you've done this to me," or "You've made me feel like this," or "That's not fair," or whatever. Whereas when I am in my center, then it is a lot more of a, okay, I'm just feeling these uncomfortable feelings and I will sit with them, and there is no blame. It's just what's happening right now. And if I if I can feel them without what I call shit FM playing, without a load of negative self-talk that's perpetuating the feelings, just drop the mind and just feel into the body, then they will pass. And there's been a lot of that. I don't know if you've been aware of that with these powerful equinox full moon and so on. There was a lot of emotion and stuff just rising up in me, and just feeling really scared and a lot of fear. And I'm kind of going, well, where's that coming from? And I guess as a little boy, we could easily go, oh, it's their fault, or it's because of this. And it was like, no, I just need to be with this. It's just what's happening, and it does, and then it passes, and then it passes. It just perpetuates the cycle, doesn't it, when we don't take responsibility? So I think that's one of the key things, owning our place in it and seeing the bigger picture, isn't it? I mean, that example that I just gave, it's so important to see the big picture, that there's personal stuff going on to some degree because we are a person, but we're also so connected to the whole collective consciousness and what's going on in the planets and what's going on in the cosmos as well, and some of it's not personal, so we don't have to make it personal all the time.
True. What would you like people to get out of your book? What would you like them to take away from it?
Stepping stones in the mist, the first one.
Uh-huh.
The key thing is the power of vulnerability, because what happened when we share our stories and we own our stories, it seems to have been an important part in my ongoing awakening. It's like I can kind of let go of the story. It's still part of me, and it's and I still honor it, but it doesn't have to be a record that's playing over and over. So that to share and to honor our stories and to be okay with what happened and recognize that it's something that happened for our highest good. And that when we share those stories, we'll see what happened with the book was that it gave so many other people other permission to go, oh, it's not just me. And it's okay to be messed up, and it's okay to be a cracked pot, and it's okay to get things wrong. It's okay to have shame about decisions that we've made or whatever. But when we share them, it just gives, that's one of the big common feedbacks of people go, oh, it's okay, it's not just me. I could so relate to that. And that just seems to be, again, let's just talk about everything. Let's be okay being vulnerable, because it is so powerful for ourselves. It's been such a healing tool for me, and it's key to my practice now. It's to be vulnerable, and it's just so helpful for everybody else as well. It's such a simple win-win, Yeah, the power of vulnerability. Vulnerability is a superpower. I really like that.
Where can they get your book?
Okay, the best place to get my book is to come through Facebook, really, and just to speak to me directly. It is, if you want a signed paperback copy. It's also available on Amazon. There's a Kindle version, and there's the Audible version as well, so you can have the audio book with me reading you a story. But Amazon, I don't like Amazon very much, and they keep messing up the prices on the paperback. So I think on Amazon at the moment it says the paperback costs £89 or something, and I've been through this a few times where I've got them to change the price back to the right price, and it's such a long-winded thing. So yeah, just come through me, connect through Facebook. I'm big on Facebook, and I just pop them in the post, and I just see them, little seeds that go on.
So people who know who you are, your name is MIguel Dean, and you are from Britain.
I am.
Or United Kingdom, whatever. What? Yeah, I know. I'm so confused. Now, if people want to work with you in England, can they give you a call?
Yeah, for sure.
How do they get a hold of you there?
Yeah. So my website is just www.migueldean.net. There is a contact inquiry facility on the website, and you can read a little bit more about me. Or if you want, you can just email me with my email address. There's a few email addresses. Probably the best email address for this audience will be love in action. It's just all one word, love in action @migueldean.co.uk. So you can get hold of me there. Yeah, you just Google MIguel Dean. There's loads of talks and interviews and YouTube stuff, and you'll find me easy enough. And yeah, I love people to get in touch. Whether it's just a question, or they want a copy of the book, or they're interested in some one-to-one sessions. I do healing conversations with adults who are ready to really let go of their stuff and really step up into a higher place, so that they can serve this amazing awakening, this amazing times that we're living in, and let's really get the ball rolling, and because there doesn't need to be so much suffering, and for the children and the generations to come, if not for ourselves. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. We've run out of time, and I loved reading your book, and I hope everybody contacts you for a copy. It's called Stepping Stones in the Mist with MIguel Dean, and it's life lessons for overcoming adversity, which we all can use at one time or another. So you have a really good evening, and thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been a really lovely night.
Thank you, Cathy. Yeah. Thank you ever so much for getting in touch and inviting me. It's always a privilege to have these heartfelt conversations, and that through just us having a chat, hopefully other people listening will benefit. And it's so simple, isn't it? It's so simple.
I know. I love modern electronics.
Yeah. Wonderful.
All right. Have a lovely evening. Aloha.
Aloha. Bye-bye for now. Bye, Cathy.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, lots of love. Bye-bye.